Today we are continuing with our Kubernetes lessons, and we are going to be looking at service objects today. We are going to be looking at the service. So I think I explained it yesterday what service is all about and how it is being used. So once more, we understand that we always have a pod. We have already discussed about the different objects. We have discussed about the pod object. We have discussed about the replication controller. We have discussed about the replica set, and we have discussed about the deployment object. Now, in real sense, you will always be doing deployment objects. You are always going to be doing deployment objects. All right. Now, but when you will do your deployment object, after you do your deployment object, when this deployment has been deployed in Kubernetes, what will happen? You will need a service. You will need a service that is linked to this deployment that can now remove your application to the external world. So this is the service that links to this deployment that removes this application to the external world. Why does it happen like that? Look up. There are times in which there is an application of this nature. You have the front end. You have the front end of the application. This is your front end of the application. Then you have the back end of the application, and then you have the database of the application, right? So most often this is how we have our situation. Now, the normal users of the application, the normal people that uses the application, what do they access? They access this front end. Okay, they access this front end. When they access this front end, what will happen? When they have access to this front end, the front end takes them from here and then gives them access to this back end. This back end like this is not available to them. The front end takes their request and give them access to this back end. Now, when it gives them access to this back end, the back end now takes whatever their command is and enter the database, right? And enter the database. So what happens? Why is the use of service coming to play? The use of service is coming to play because they don't want, if they allow you to be accessing the application with the ports, the way we are always accessing it with direct ports. Therefore, it is possible for you from outside here to access this database directly. You see the point? It is possible for you from outside to access this database directly without any problem. Since if you happen to know the IP of this database, you can access it directly. But with the use of different type of services, you are unable to access it directly. Why are you unable to access it directly? Because we have three types of service. We have three types of service. The first service is called the node pod. A node pod service. Right? This is the very first service. It is called a node pod service. The second service is called the load balancer service. This service is very misleading. And the third service is called the cluster IP service. Now, I will explain these services to you very well. You understand. The service node pod is the service that gives access to people to be able to to reach this front end. So node port service gives access to people to be able to reach this front end, but they are going to reach the front end only through one port, only through one single port, right? So if they give you, if these two are a cluster of ports, these are two ports with one service, and you install the cluster giving the service not port, then this cluster, you can only access the front end through that particular port, one port. Okay, so this cluster like this, if this port fails, you will not be able to access this other port. Why? Because you are using node port. Node port is a target port for one port, for one single port. Now, when you are using the port type load balancer, the port type load balancer takes now these two ports like this one and this one. It takes now these two ports, right? And then it joins the two of them, and then it creates one port number. It creates now one port number. There will be a port number that is created here, might be like 4890, through which now, from this port number, you can either access this port or you can either access this port. Okay, so first thing first, if you give node port is having access only to one of the ports. If you give load balancer type, then the load balancer will take the two ports and then merge them together and then remove one port outside. That means only through one port you are going to access these two Kubernetes ports. Okay, then the type cluster IP. The cluster IP. Cluster IP is the movement, the network within the cluster. That means it is the port communication between this port, this one like this, and this one like this, and this one. They communicate using cluster IP. Cluster IP is not available outside, which means you have been given, you that is outside, you have been given either node port or load balancer. That's the one that you have been given. But through that one, you cannot communicate with this back end, because to communicate with this back end, only this port can communicate with this back end. No other person can communicate with this back end. Okay, so the reasons behind there are different types of services in Kubernetes is for this security reason. Docker does not have that security reason. That's this security setup. Swarm is not having this security setup. So this is an advantage of Kubernetes, a huge advantage of Kubernetes over Swarm. Okay, so for this you should be very capable of explaining what is a node port. A node port is a communication between the port and a single Kubernetes port. That is the individual, the user, and a single Kubernetes port. Because node ports are not generally used in the industry for industrial purposes. They are used by engineers to test. Like you just install this thing and then you want to see whether this particular port is running. You just take the IP of this port and you take the port number and then you access it using node port. But now when you must have installed 20 and 30 of them, the only way by which you can access the cluster is using a load balancer port. Okay, so you should be capable of telling anybody that asks you that what are the different Kubernetes services that you know. You tell the person that I know of a node port, I know of cluster IP, I know of load balancer. He will tell you that, okay, suppose I have an application that I want to expose outside. I want the application to be exposed outside. And then I want it such that the application within the cluster should not be available outside. How can I go about this? I have an application that I want the application that has a front end and a back end. How can I go about it? You tell the person that in your application, your front end, you are going to give the service load balancer. And then in your back end, you are going to give the service cluster IP. When you give the service cluster IP, that service will not be, that pod will not be available to the public. It will just be available only within the cluster, right? You explain it like this, you will understand that you know what you are saying. Okay, that is the Kubernetes service for you. So when we come to that, we'll discover that, look at the deployment file that we had yesterday. This is our deployment file. In this deployment file like this, the deployment file is deploying Nginx, right? It is deploying Nginx 1.7.9, and as it is deploying Nginx, we have the service here. So you should just understand now that what every deployment has a corresponding service. For each and every pod, there must be a service, because if there is no service, it's dangerous. The pod will not be readily available. So this is the service for this deployment. Okay, this is the service for this deployment. When you deploy this deployment and finish, then the next thing is you deploy its service. Okay, so that is how services and deployments are functioning together. So let us run our deployment. I think we have ls. Okay, we have our Kubernetes YAML file already there. This is our deployment file. Let us enter into that deployment file, vim deployment dot YAML. So this is the file that we are talking about, right? We have Nginx deployment, the author, the type, proxy server, the replicas are 2. All this is already there. I already installed Minikube before we started. Okay, we save and we quit. And then what do? We run kubectl apply hyphen what deployment hyphen f deployment dot YAML. Our Nginx is created. Now to that Nginx there is a service, this service YAML file. So let us run the YAML file, the service file. We run kubectl apply hyphen f service dot YAML. Now this is a file that is going now to open the ports, the various ports in that deployment. Run the file, it gets created. Now we can run now kubectl get all. Want to get everything that is there. We are going to get see that our service Nginx is created under what type? Node pod. See, this is a node pod, which means we can only access one port through this particular port number that is open. We have the container is open at port 80, but we can access it at port 3008. The port type is TCP. Okay, then our deployment one container is running. There are two pods that are supposed to be running. One is running, the other one is still getting available, up to date. One is available for deployment. Then we have our replicas. Desired 2, there are 2 of them. Current, there are 2 of them, but only one is ready right now. It is the way I configured the Minikube. Okay, so presently now we have our files. Now these guys always ask some questions. What if you want to know the health of your pod? As I said, if you want to know the health of your pod, you use kubectl get pods, and then from here you see the pod that is available. Then you run kubectl describe, and then you give the pod name. Let us describe this pod. Kubectl describe pod. You have to put describe pod and then the pod name. Now this is the pod. So once you want to find out information about a particular pod, you just run kubectl describe. Okay, the pod will, the information that you want, you are going to get it. All the information that you need, you are going to get it here. All right. So when you want to get a general overview, you run kubectl get pod -0 wide. I talked about that one last time. We already ran that command. Kubectl get pods -0 wide. Now please, most of these commands, there are many of them, but they will never be asking you to give complicated commands. I mean, when you say that you have worked with Kubernetes, they will just ask you which command do you use to run a Kubernetes YAML file, because generally you can never forget that type of a command, but they cannot be asking you for very complicated commands. No, they just ask very basic commands, that how do you run your Kubernetes YAML file. You say kubectl -f name of the file, then apply. So that is what you are going to tell them. Okay, so if you must retain anything from the class of today, know about the different types of services. There are 3 of them: node pod, load balancer, and cluster IP. Which service is always by default? The service that is always by default is the cluster IP. When you run a service without specifying the type of service that you want, it is the cluster IP that is going to get installed. Okay, but if you want now, you can open now the node pod, or you can open now the load balancer. All right, any question? Yes, Sakiba.
Yes, we run a command to check the health of our pod. What are we checking about the health, sir? Is it running or what? I'm really lost there.
kubectl get port. Look at something. There is one pod that is not running, it is pending. Are you seeing?
Okay.
So
Yes,
so
yes,
my question is, why is this pod pending? You get it? That is a reason to
yeah,
start checking, right? That's a reason to
yes,
start
sir.
checking why this pod is pending. Even if I delete the pod, another one will not get created, it will still be pending, right? So now what do I want to do? I want to verify what is happening. Kubectl describe me what is happening with this port, right? Describe
Yes, sir.
port, and then I give the name, the port name, this particular port.
Yeah, the part that is pending. Okay.
Yes, the port that is pending.
Mm,
I give the name of the port. Now, what am I looking for? I'm looking for what is causing this port to be pending. Okay.
okay.
Yes, I'm
Okay,
looking
sir.
for
Yeah.
what is happening that this port is pending. Look at the status of the port. It is showing. Let's go gradually. The name of the port is this. The namespace, it is in the default namespace. I'll come to tell you what is namespace. The priority is 0, right? When they talk about
Yes, sir.
priority, what priority of the port? It is like priority, like it sounds. Okay, service
Okay.
account is
Okay.
by default. The node, that means it does not have a node. Are you seeing?
Okay. Yes. Yes, sir.
The port does not have a node. So unless you run this describe, you cannot be able to see that there is no node in this port.
Okay.
This port needs a node, right?
Yes, sir.
That means the attribution of nodes to ports, or the attribution of ports to nodes, is having an issue. That means we I ran this kubectl with one node. So I bet
Yeah.
it is said that only one port per node. So that is why this port
Yeah.
is pending. So if I did not run
Okay.
kubectl describe, there will be no way I'm going to find out any of this.
This information. Okay.
Yes. So this one it will remain pending like this forever. Okay.
Okay, sir. And while it's pending like this, there can never be access to users to this
No,
container.
no,
Okay.
no, no, no. You can never. The port, as in pending state,
Mm-hmm.
it will never be available. Now,
Okay,
as
sir.
we are talking about a complete Kubernetes YAML file, there are some other commands in a YAML file that will tell you that kill a pod if it is pending for the next 2 minutes.
Okay.
You get it?
Okay.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
there are some commands in that YAML file which will say that if a pod get pending for the next 2 minutes, kill the pod. You give the pod a specific time for it to spin up, and if that time is not yet if that time elapsed and the pod is not yet running, you ask Kubernetes to kill the pod. So that is the reason
Okay.
for kubectl describe. You get everything that is happening. Look at
Going
look at look at
happening.
look,
Okay, sir.
look at the type here. They say warning, failed scheduling 78 seconds ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over
Yeah.
6 minute 43 seconds, default scheduler 0 notes, 0 and 1
Mm-hmm.
notes are available. That means notes are not available for that port to be scheduled.
Okay.
So they say one node didn't have free ports. You see,
Uh,
it is really
yeah.
clearly
Okay. Mm-hmm. Explaining.
explained there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually go through and debug what is going on there, and then you start looking for answers to that. So you run your kubectl describe. Now, when you in an interview session, when you have done this, if you have done this in an interview station, some people can do it their own way, some people can do it their own way, and some people come to an interview session with a stereotype mind. They want you to say that you run kubectl -0 wide, but you tell them that no, you run kubectl describe and then port name, and then they'll tell you that, are you sure? You say yes, that is what you have been doing and that is the way you do, and the difference between this and this, that means you give yourself, because sometimes when you are asked in an interview, are you certain of what you are saying, you shiver. Don't shiver. I bet you People do not know everything, even those who interview. In an interview session, I have explained something to the interviewer when he did not know. So be very confident with what you have practiced, not what you have read, what you have
Mm-hmm.
practiced and seen. Like you have run kubectl uh, describe, and you have seen what is happening. Be confident with it and talk with
Yeah.
confidence that I have run it, I have seen it, I have done it. What you have actually practiced, be very confident with it and say it with a lot of vigor. Because if you start doubting yourself and
Okay.
start talking without then that means you have not yet done it.
Okay.
Any other question? Okay, we are definitely going to continue on Tuesday, where we are going to have a talk about namespace. We are going to have a talk about ingress. I have to talk to you about ingress because they are always asking this question: what is ingress? We are going to talk about namespace. We are going to talk about ingress, and then we are going to talk about secrets. These three things we are going to discuss on Tuesday. With that, I wish everybody a good beginning of the week and see you on Tuesday. Bye bye to everyone.
Good night, sir.
Okay.
Good
Good
night, sir.
night, sir. Good night, guys.